Hi guys, in this video I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about travel photography, particularly address, some people actually they can't work or do anything creative without being inspired to do so. And I'm going to talk about how I feel about that. And also I'm going to introduce to you a small village close to Hanoi in Vietnam called Duong Lam. Duong Lam is an ancient village which won UNESCO Award for Cultural Heritage Conservation. And why those award hasn't really worked out for the locals there? Well, in some ways at least. Duong Lam was the first village in the rural area of Vietnam recognized as a national cultural heritage. The ancient village has a history of about 1200 years, with some houses there dating back 400 years. One of the special things about this village is that most of the buildings are made of laterite and mud, two materials they have in abundance. And it does give a certain look to the village. The colors and the look to the village comes from these materials. Two of Vietnam kings, Duong Lam and, this guy, they were both born in Duong Lam, giving the village its prestige. Both men led a resistance war against Northern invasion, and after winning national independence were crowned kings. After their death, the local people built templates in their honor, because that's what they do. When you get shit done, you get a temple. It is a tourist place, and like all other tourist places, tourists change things. Some good and some bad. But before we continue, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Share my videos, that would help a lot. Thank you. I want to give you a solid advice when you're traveling and doing travel photography in the third world. Know what you can do and what you can't do. Try not to get into trouble with the local and especially not the police. Me, I've been attacked by police dogs, maced and tased willingly because I wanted to know what it felt like. And what did that teach me? Do not fuck with the police. And that was at home in Iceland and also on a visit to the US. So I was kind of in a controlled environment, But I don't even want to know what the police in Southeast Asia has in their bag of tricks. So just any photograph is not worth finding out. I was approached by a police officer in Vietnam because I was filming, doing a video unknowingly in front of a police station. And he was not happy. He came, I did not understand what he was saying. My guide came and explained to me, and I was like, I'm sorry, sir. I'm a moron, sir. Please, I will never do this again, sir. Can I offer you any money, sir? What can I do to make this right? Just like a complete coward because, I don't want to test these guys and neither do you. But back to Duong Lam and tourists. Sometimes tourism can drive me crazy, which is kind of a paradox because tourism is a huge and welcome part of my life. It's what I do. But sometimes tourists strip away the local identity, the very thing they are there to experience. So, knowing the value of this historical town, in 2005 the Vietnamese government declared Duong Lam a national monument. And with that, they introduced an aggressive program of preservation and restoration and a heavy restriction on what could and could not be done. But those restrictions did not only apply to new things, but also things already made. If you ever travel to this part of the world, you will quickly see that if someone has a little space around his little house, they will just add more house, just expand out of cheap building material and in no harmony whatsoever with what is already there. And if they have no space around the house, they will just add on top, they will just add a floor to the house. And in a town with this prestige, history, and the newfound attention from tourists, this was a problem. So in an effort to conserve history and keep tourists happy, the government made the residents tear down some of the things already built without any compensation. And those not in compliant, the government would punish in form of cutting power and water for a period of time. I tried to look up other parts of Vietnam that the government has enforced this kind of protection and restriction. I could not find it, but that doesn't mean it's not there. But this effort has paid off in regards to protection and the look of the town. It's very beautiful, but the residents are not all happy. Living in two small houses, many families with 8 to 10 people living in 30 to 50 square meters and banned from expanding. Classroom with 90 kids, 90 kids in a room less than 60 square meters in the Duong Lam kindergarten. So now a group of local signed an application to have their village's historical status redrawn, pointing out that the needs of local residents trumps historic value and tourists. You would think because of all that, the local residents, they would resent the tourist attraction they're receiving, but they are not. They are quite happy with it. It does provide revenue for the town and the businesses in that town. And life there compared to many other towns seems pretty good for the most part. The thing is, I was told before I started to go to Vietnam that Vietnamese could be nasty with tourists, especially if you're photographing them, and especially in the north of Vietnam, which Duong Lam is. It's 2 hours away from Hanoi, the capital. I never experienced anything other than kindness from those people. Yes, you can see in some of the big tourist spots, people are sometimes tired of the constant attention they're getting. Put yourself in their shoes. You know, imagine this. You have in your neighborhood thousands and thousands of tourists coming to visit you every day, taking photographs of you and your children, you know, whether you like it or not. And do this for 10 years and see how much you like it then. I'm a big guy and I used to have a long beard. And the first time I went to Myanmar, I had this long beard and people noticed me. Big guy with red, I was red because I just got there and I got a little sunburn. Big red Viking with a beard in his face, huge guy compared to anybody. Of course, a lot of people wanted to get selfies with me. Probably more people wanted to get selfies with me than I was shooting. Even monks, pretty girls, everybody wanted a selfie with the big Viking, and I was happy. It was amazing to get all this attention. I was like a rock star. But let's do this for 10 years. It's not fun anymore. So It's very important for you as a visitor in a country, even if everything is new and everything is so fucking interesting, you have to put yourself in their shoes and be respectful. Be considerate in your photography. When I first started travel photography, I wasn't very good at it. And I do still have a lot to learn, not necessarily in the technical aspect of it, although you can always learn more about settings and stuff like that. But given that you understand the exposure triangle and you're able to get focus on what you're shooting, you should have all the technical know-how you really need. When you're working with people, it's not about technical know-how and how good you are in that aspect of photography, given that your lack of knowledge doesn't slow you down. In which case, it's very easy to fix. You don't even have to leave your home to become a technical expert. So do that. Go on YouTube, find videos that teach you how to master your camera and the exposure triangle. In landscape photography, you have time to think shit over. You have time to, you set up on your tripod, you double check your settings, ISO 100, f11. And if you're not sure, if you have someone with you, you can even ask him. So you have time to get the shot. In travel photography, you don't have this time. It's moments. And if you miss the moment, it's done, it's gone, and it will never come again. So you need to be pretty slick with your settings in travel photography. So practice. But settings aside, travel photography, it's much more about interacting with people, deciding stuff like, should you do a candid? Should I put on a long lens and do a candid? Or should I walk up to the people, approach them, and how do you actually do that? Especially if you don't speak the language, how do you communicate? Do you know anything about the people? Because it's all about telling stories. And if you don't know anything about the place or the people, how are you going to do that? How are you going to tell a story with no background info? Also, what's ethical and what's not? I want to take an example with this boy, even if I did not take this photo in this day in question, in Duong Lam, because it's a good example. We visited a home in rural Vietnam. There were a few toddlers there, and those who hadn't been toilet trained, they didn't have their pants on, so they were naked. The lower half was naked, but they had t-shirts or whatever on the torso. We were invited to this house to take photos, so I didn't really pay much attention to it when I was shooting. But later I noticed that I have a few photos of those kids with their lower half naked. And some of those photos are really, really nice. But I don't find it ethical to show those photos. Even though many people do, I choose not to. Another example, I was in Myanmar once, and I was in a place which had an escalator. And there were these poor people trying to get on the escalator. They had never seen this before, and they were, stepping on it and touching the rail, and it was a little bit funny seeing that. So I thought, I might take a video or at least a photo, but I didn't, because I'm not about belittling poor people to get likes on Facebook. So every people's ethics are different. I do emphasize with the participants in my workshops to try to be respectful and ethical, and because you get more from people if you work with them and not against them. To make this video, I picked that day in Duong Lam for a reason. And the reason is to talk about having to be inspired to do something creative. This was the last day of a 3-week journey, which started in Hong Kong, but I was mostly in Vietnam. And if you ever done a journey like this, you will know it's exhausting. Even, when you're just doing like a landscape photo tour, the long days, excessive travels, it takes a toll. But in travel photography, you have all that, but you add the human interaction, being in an environment that you don't understand. People, you still have to communicate with them. It's an amazing experience, but it does drain your batteries, both mentally and physically. And I was tired that day. Tired, drained, unmotivated, and uninspired. Nothing looked interesting. It was a gray morning just before tourist traffic began, which was actually a good thing. But I just didn't feel like shooting. So what do you do when you feel like that? A lot of people say they have to be inspired and motivated to shoot or do anything else creative, because only when you are inspired, great things can happen. And if that's you, you need to rethink shit. That trip, I was working. I was scouting and planning a photo workshop, investing time and money to make an unforgettable trip for my clients. Nobody gives a fuck if I'm tired or uninspired. If I don't produce, I don't get paid. And if I invested money in something, I need to be able to get a return of an investment. Otherwise, my business suffers. So being sick, tired, unmotivated, hungry, drained, uninspired, depressed, need a toilet, rip your pants, broken heart, thirsty, or whatever excuse you can find, nobody gives a fuck. This also applies if you're working for someone else. Nobody cares. Just do your job. But how about if you're not working? You're a participant in a photo workshop. Well, maybe it's not that big of a deal, but that depends on how you look at it. It is also an investment of time and money to do a tour like this, although not everyone do it for the same reason. And sometimes you do have to prioritize. Like in this case, I focused more on my photography. I kind of skipped most of the video make, still doing what I came to do, still doing my job. On longer tours like this, some people will just have to skip parts of a day or a whole day, because sometimes that's necessary, because you might, if you don't do that, you might have to skip a week. So you have to know your limits. You have to know when you have to take a rest. But when you're there at location, you need to be able to overcome everything what's wrong, because you need a functioning brain to have any chance of telling a story or to make your viewer curious looking at your photos. So how do I do that? Sometimes, I just react to something I see. No time to plan or give any thought to what you're shooting, except trying to frame it and keep the subject in focus. And when you have a moving target, for example, that's all you can deal with. Like here. Here I got this woman just as she looked up. It's a decent framing. It would have been nicer not to have the motorcycle behind her, but this is what I managed to do with this moment. She's a very typical woman for this town, traveling on an old bike, carrying what she needs in a basket, and her clothes are very typical for this town, for North Vietnam too, and the hat. So if nothing else, this photo shows how a woman in this town dresses, how she gets around, her confident level. The streets are clean, she's clean, she's looking straight at me, confident. She doesn't seem bothered by me standing there and shooting. And then we have this woman. I did a worse job framing this shot, but they have a lot in common, this woman and the previous one. This one is not as relaxed, doing what she can to avoid eye contact, not as comfortable with me standing there shooting, but giving no signal that she did not want me to shoot. And those signals, when they are given, they are normally very obvious. But this confirms my idea on how women in this town dress and how they get around. So, if you look, there's actually a lot of information in those two photos about women in Duong Lam. So there's a story there. So then we have this restaurant. Probably husband and wife preparing for business. Seats are plastic, chairs, tiny little chair. It's really common. And like I mentioned, I'm a big guy. And sitting on those chairs, it feels like, a joke. Feels like somebody's making fun of me. But it's common, and that's just how it is. But behind this house, I saw this. Somebody was cooking. It smelled nice, but what you see here is a cooked dog. So you might draw a conclusion, since this is in the back of the restaurant, that this restaurant is offering dog meat. And so what? Is that bad? Do we automatically judge everyone else from our own standards? And is that fair if we do? Not everyone uses dogs as pets. Many don't give a shit about dogs. They just eat them. Like we do here in Iceland, we eat horse meat. Does that make them bad people because they eat dogs? Or does it simply means they exist in a different culture? If you're too judgmental, you will get much less out of traveling and learning about other people. But it turned out, after referring to an expert in the Vietnamese language, that this restaurant does not offer dog meat, but many other restaurants do. This restaurant was more about birds, pigeons, some fish or whatever. At least there was no dog on the menu there. And here, a massive Jesus church in the center of Buddha land. Why do those old Christian churches always look like a scene from a horror movie? Buddha temples, they kind of look more happy and lively. And to demonstrate the difference between people in a small town, depending on if they're Christian or Buddhist, there's a story. I didn't do that story, but somebody could. And if you do it well, you might even get it published, make some money. It's all about finding your story. This woman was cutting meat and selling on the street. She had a table and a screen over the table, and a lot of people just did it on the ground. But she had a table, but it's outside. And is that clean enough to eat? It's probably cleaner than the product you get in Walmart. And the woman is clean. She even has a glove. I didn't see that often. Surroundings looks nice and clean. The old ladies in the background, they seem happy, talking, laughing. So I'm guessing from everything I've seen so far, the people in this village are quite well off compared to many other villages in Vietnam. Probably because of tourists, but could this be dog meat? She's cutting. And that's how I do it. I look around, gather information, with looking, with asking people, trying to find out the essence of the location or the scenario I'm in. I look for my shots with a curious, non-judgmental eye, trying to find out and ask myself these questions. Why is this woman only wearing one shoe? And what's that behind the door? And also just feelings. I try to evoke a feeling which I might bring to the viewer of the photo. Sometimes one photo is strong enough to do that, and that's always a nice thing when you have powerful image that needs no words. Sometimes you have to do more. Sometimes you have to do a sequence of 2 or more photos. Sometimes you do a narrative, or you have to use captions to tell your story. It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. Just figure out what works for you in any given situation. And every photo does not need to be a hero shot. Every photo does not need to be like this one powerful image. If you're only aiming for that, you will shoot very little and you will showcase very little of your work, because those photos, they just don't pop out whenever you want it to happen. You have to work for it. And this is the process. You shoot and shoot and shoot, and you shoot yourself closer to the story. You adjust, you look at it from a different perspective. You just work your way closer. Sometimes you can do it, like I said, with one photo. Sometimes you need more. Sometimes you need narrative. It's just, how do you invoke a feeling in people? Dog meat, it's disgusting. Some people find it disgusting. That's a feeling. It's something ugly. It's judgmental. It brings out the worst in people. Then again, you would see people that find, they're selling food, they're cutting meat on the street. That's gross. I would never eat that. But they would probably eat the Walmart stuff, which is full of chemicals, and this meat is not. I don't know. It's different for anyone. It's just, if you get your viewer to look at your photo a little longer than a glimpse, long enough to get a feeling, even if it's a bad feeling, curiosity, maybe, this town seems really interesting. I would like to go there. I would like to see this. Anything. You're doing a good job if you manage to do that. And sometimes you just get lucky, but luck is guaranteed if you work your ass off. So after hours of shooting, walking around randomly shooting, we saw her, walking down the street, smiling, with her broken back, black teeth, empty water bottles and other stuff in her hat. And when she talked to people around her, it was always like she was giving them shit, talking really loud with an authority in her voice. She saw that we were interested, and she was quite happy about it. She invited us to her home. And when we got there, I was just amazed, because I was expecting a poor home, because she looked poor, with an empty, her hat was filled with junk. But her home was like a concrete house, 2-storied, beautiful new house with a balcony and a big garden. Terrace and fenced-in area. The inside was, it was not really nice. It was like There were no paint on the wall. It was kind of like when you get a house which is wind and waterproof. You know, it has all the windows, it has all this shelter, but there was nothing inside. But it was furnished. And she had a big-ass TV and a bottle of liquor, which she invited us. And she just seemed well off. I saw some photos on her table that indicate that she was a widow, and she used to be a woman of status. You could really see that on those photos. I didn't ask, didn't feel like it was any of my business. We were there in different. We were just there to shoot, and that's what we did. And we started in her backyard. Well, she was doing, some chores around the house, sweeping her hallway and doing stuff around the house. Then we went to do a portrait shoot in her backyard. It didn't work for me, that shoot. The scene was too busy. It looked good when we were setting it up. It had smoke and stuff like that, but it didn't work. So we set up a shoot in her living room, and that was better. Here are a few photos that I took. A lot of them are similar, but I like them. These are nice photos. These are kind of like a different portrait. So I took a few photos and worked my way to this photo. I really like this one. This would be the photo from this shoot. I only need one, but it's good to have many. So for a day that I basically had to jumpstart myself to get my ass off the ground and start working, it turned out pretty good. It wasn't the best photo day I had in Vietnam, but I have something to show for it. And I even have like a 2 or 3 pictures, what I considered portfolio pictures, which is not bad. And at least 20 or 30 very usable pictures I could well use in magazine, in articles, in travel stories, in anything. So the day was a success, and I have something to show for it. Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. If you wait around for the clouds to part and the bolt of lightning to strike in your brain, you are not going to make an awful lot of work. All the best ideas come out of the process, they come out of the work itself. I hope you took something from this video. I hope you liked it. Please consider subscribing, sharing, liking this video. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.